Hi design enthusiasts! Welcome to Digital Design Foundations, a non-designer friendly course. An online course where we teach you design essentials that'll help you create more impactful visual communications for your brand. Have you been creating content with templates for a while but still feel like your final designs aren't that great? Have you tried starting a design from scratch but wasn't sure how to make it look amazing or even how to finish it? Then this course is for you. This course has 12 lessons with video explanations and supplemental material for you to learn more and practice with. As you go through these lessons, you won't only learn about design, but also how to get the most out of Visme. So let's get started. Before we start designing, we'll cover the foundational questions and preparations you'll need to do before starting any design project. Preparing for design is much like strategizing for a project or planning a marketing campaign. You need to know things about your audience, have defined business goals for the design, and have a clear idea of what you want to achieve. The first step in this preliminary process is understanding the what, the why, and the who of your project. Second, we'll look at how to gather and organize design inspiration. And finally, how to create a mood board to set a visual style to your project design. In all aspects of business, every project starts off with a purpose, a clear idea of the target audience, and knowledge of what the final deliverable will be. The same applies to design. So let's discuss what this process is going to look like. At the start of every new design project, you have to define three vital details: the why, the what, and the who. The why refers to the purpose for creating this design in the first place. Do you want to teach something, share information, or accompany a text? The what refers to what exactly you'll be designing. Will it be a presentation, infographic, document, or maybe something else? Who is more like for whom and refers to your target audience. Who are you designing it for? Is it for new audiences or loyal customers? What is your ideal client profile or ICP for this project? Knowing who you're designing for and the reason will help you decide what type of visual content to create. For example, let's say your company sells unique decor items and refurbished vintage furniture. Your audience is young homeowners or renters between 21 and 35 years old that prefer to decorate with select items and special pieces. They prefer not to DIY old home decor. They want the final product no matter the price. They live in major cities, like to entertain guests, and enjoy showing off their prized items. Your target audience spends time on social media, especially Instagram and Pinterest, and they buy online or scour boutique stores across the country. With this information, we choose to create a promotional booklet that can be shared online or printed professionally. If you're not sure how to figure out your ICP, we've got a guide on it in our blog, so you'll find a link in the resources for this lesson. If there's one thing you can take away from this lesson, it's to always keep in mind who you're designing for. Starting a new design can feel daunting, especially if you don't know where to begin. Thankfully, you already know the what, the why, and the who for your project. Now it's time to get some visual inspiration. The best way to find that inspiration is to look for other designs that are similar to what you want to make. It's just like doing market research, but for design. Let's get started here. You'll want to keep visual inspiration files in your cloud storage, so create a folder for it. Now, I'll name mine Inspiration for a High-End Decor Promotional Booklet. So where do we look for inspiration? You have a few options, and I always like to start by browsing some of Visme's templates. Visme is a design platform that marries the best of two worlds, simplicity and power. It has an intuitive interface where you can design all types of content. The thousands of available templates in Visme are carefully crafted in-house and crafted primarily for business brands. Two other favorites are Behance, a design and portfolio platform, and Pinterest. And finally, we'll look at what other high-end decor brands and stores are doing with their visuals by searching on Google. Let's first look at some Visme templates. You don't need to be logged in or have a Visme account to look at the templates. Also, you don't need to stick to just the type of project you're working on. You can get inspired by other types of project. In this case, it's going to be catalogs, magazines, and brochures. To see lots of different results, use the term decor in the search bar, and there are a ton of templates to browse through. I'll pick a few and save them to my inspiration folder. I'll choose the examples that I think look good and also the ones that I think my ICP of young, affluent homeowners are attracted to. I'll also choose examples with neutral and glamorous colors that look refined and chic. I've got now about 6 templates in my folder, so let's keep going. Now let's go to Behance, and you're going to do the same thing. You might have to create an account on Behance, but once you do it, you'll have it forever and it's free. In Behance, when you search for decor, you'll see lots of different examples, including branding strategies, catalogs, brochures, and a whole lot more. Browse through and pick the design that match your product and attract your ICP. Perfect. I got some good inspiration here, so now let's go on to Pinterest. In Pinterest, I'll search for decor designs and look at these results. We'll pick some using the same ideas as before. And done. Pinterest never disappoints. And finally, let's look at some competitors. I'll go to Google Images and search decor promotional items. We've got a few results, mostly from company websites, Instagram, and Pinterest, so I'll save to put them in my inspiration folder. The last preliminary step before designing is to draft a visual style for your project. By looking for inspiration images, you've probably got an idea of what you want to achieve, but there's one more thing you need to take care of: a visual style mood board. A mood board is a sort of collage where you put together the inspiration images that most represent the idea you're going for. It includes a color palette and a font pairing. You can create a mood board with Visme quite easily by selecting the template and replacing the placeholder content with your own. First, you're going to want to replace the images with your own inspiration images. Upload them to your files and replace them in the mood board. To choose the colors and the fonts for the visual style mood board, first you need to know if your company or the client you're designing for has a brand or guidelines document, and if they do, the work is already half done because you have a base to work from. Use the brand colors just as they are or create subtle variations. Same for the fonts. If there are brand guidelines, the fonts are already chosen for you. Otherwise, you can choose fonts from inside the Visme editor or your favorite font foundry or supplier. This is what our mood board looks like for the promotional booklet. In section 2, you'll learn more about color palettes and font pairing, so you can come back later and finish this mood board if you want. And so we're going to pause there, and I will see you in the next lesson. Hey, and welcome back to Design Foundations. In this lesson, you'll learn about the big picture in design. What do I mean by the big picture? The overall visual balance of a design. It's the composition and the layout. It's what everyone sees before reading any text. Good visual balance and composition is the ultimate first impression. Your design reaches that standard when all visual elements, colors and images, and text are all laid out on the canvas in a pleasing way for your viewer's eyes and brain. Its opposite, bad visual balance and composition, typically create a sense of rejection in viewers, and of course, you don't want that. Visual balance, composition, and layout are psychologically related to a person's first emotional impulse reaction to a design. Knowing how to harness that magic will make you a better designer in no time, so let's first talk about visual balance. What do you think of when you hear the word balance? Probably a scale like this one, right? When we talk about visual balance, we refer to the distribution of the visual weight of objects, colors, texture, and space on a design. But what exactly does visual weight mean? Imagine that each element on a design has its own attractive force, meaning that some things are more noticeable than others. The more noticeable elements have a stronger force, therefore a higher visual weight. Take a look at these squares. One is light blue and simple, while the other one has an intricate fill design in dark colors. Which one has the most visual weight? That's right, the texture square has a heavier visual weight than the light blue square. So when the elements in a design are laid out in a balanced composition according to their individual and grouped visual weights, you've got a good visual balance. Deducing if a design has a good visual balance is pretty immediate. You can feel it. If it's not easy at first, with practice you'll get much, much better. Let's take a quick look at the 3 types of visual balance: symmetrical, asymmetrical, and radial. In symmetrical balance, the overall visual weight of the elements on one side of the design is similar to that on the other side. In asymmetrical balance, the two sides have different visual weights, but are laid out in a way that still makes the design look balanced. In radial balance, the elements are arranged around a central point and may or may not have similar weights. Before we move on to the next lesson, let's go back to the term composition. You've heard me mention it a couple of times, but what does it actually mean? Composition means the practice of uniting a variety of elements into a whole. The official artistic term is to arrange forms in a space. For example, you can ask yourself, does my design composition have good visual balance? Well, after this course, it definitely will. I hope you took plenty of notes and have a grasp on the meaning of visual balance and composition, and in the next lesson, you'll learn about the visual hierarchy and visual perception through Gestalt theory. Hello and welcome back to Design Foundations. In the previous lesson, we talked about visual balance and composition. In this lesson, we'll look at the design principles that will help you achieve them. Visual hierarchy and the Gestalt theory of visual perception are soft rules that can help you create designs with good visual balance every time. Let's talk about hierarchy first. Hierarchy is the practice of laying out elements on a canvas in a way that implicitly shows how some elements are more important than others. In the introduction lesson, we talked about creating a promotional booklet for a high-end unique decor company. This is the cover for the finished design we'll be working together to create, so now let's talk about its visual hierarchy. So what grabs your attention first when you look at this design? I'm going to guess it's the title and the beautiful item in the photo. These elements have a top hierarchy in the composition, meaning they're both the most important in terms of content while also being the most visually notorious. Let's see how that works in terms of visual perception. When building a visual hierarchy, it's important to consider the way in which people look at the text and graphics in general. There's a general pattern in how people read and grasp information in a design. Typically, viewers start at the top left corner, scan to the top right corner, and then their gaze returns to its left and keeps going back and forth, just like reading. This is called an F or Z viewing pattern, due to the shape the gaze forms on the content. Pairing your visual hierarchy with this knowledge removes a lot of guesswork to where to place the text and design elements in a visual hierarchy. So if the top hierarchy is on the title and main object, what comes next? Well, if we follow the viewing pattern, you can see it's the subtitle, then these information text boxes, and finally the information about the decor piece here at the side bottom. It's not only because they follow the viewing pattern, but also because the font size decreases, as does the hierarchy. Other designs that help with hierarchy are color and font styles, not just sizes. Stronger, more vibrant colors have a higher hierarchy than softer, subtle colors. Generally, thick font weights have more hierarchy than thin ones. Remember that it's all about the visual weight of elements and how they relate to each other. You can practice hierarchy by looking at other complete designs and analyzing how the designer set up the hierarchy. After a while, you'll notice it straight away. Of course, there are rule breakers and unique compositions like this version of the cover where the title is tilted on its side. You can also generate hierarchy by using color in addition to font size. Color can sometimes affect the order in which we read things, as well as font thickness. Apart from visual hierarchy, there's another set of design principles that will help you create designs with a good overall balance. They are called Gestalt principles and form part of the Gestalt theory of human visual perception. The Gestalt principles derive directly from psychology and the science of how humans see and perceive things. There are 8 principles that can be applied to your designs in a way that can subconsciously affect how a person perceives your content. The principles are similarity, proximity, closure, figure and ground, continuity, order and symmetry, and synchrony. Let's look at each one in detail so you can get a good grasp on how they work. The first Gestalt principle is simplicity. According to psychologists, when we identify an object, we first seek to identify its outline. We then compare it to known shapes and patterns. Without even realizing we're taking these steps, we finally combine the identified elements to recognize the whole. These principles of simplicity state that people perceive and interpret ambiguous or complex images in their simplest form. In this example, the bird on the left has a lot of detail and color, while the one on the right is a simple outline. Both are easily and quickly perceived as hummingbirds. This principle is highly valuable when designing logos and icons. Using this principle, you can take a complex visual and simplify it to the point that it's only an outline and is still recognizable. The next Gestalt principle is similarity, and it states that objects with similar characteristics are perceived as more closely related than objects that share no similar features. Our minds simply group the similar objects together regardless of their proximity to one another. So let's look at this group of shapes consisting of circles, stars, and hexagons. In the example on the left, even though the orange circles aren't in the same line, they still feel related. On the example on the right, the 3 circles are aligned, removing all the guesswork for the viewer. Design elements can be perceived as related by sharing any sort of characteristic, including color, shape, size, and texture. The proximity principle states that objects placed closer together are perceived as being more related to each other than those spaced further apart. As you can see in this example, the 9 circles on the left are perceived as one group, while the example on the right feels like 2 groups of 3 and 6 circles each. In the closure principle, our minds fill visually empty spaces and complete them. This is the principle that designers use and refer to as negative space. In the basketball example here, you can see that in both figures, the lines are easy to perceive, even if they're technically not there. Those empty lines are what we call the negative space, the area that our brains fill in automatically without even needing to think about it. We see a basketball regardless of the lines. In the WWF logo, the designers used negative spaces to create a shape that we instantly recognize as a panda. The areas that would be white on a real panda are empty, but it doesn't matter. In this example, you can see the use of both closure and simplicity principles. The principle of figure and ground states that we perceive an object either as the element of focus in the foreground or as part of the background. People tend to determine the figure and ground relationship before making any other resolutions about what they see. We've evolved to prioritize this perception so we can better navigate our surroundings. Without it, we'd be running into objects and tripping over sidewalks. In this example, when the profile of the face is alone, it's instantly perceived as a face. But on the left, the two profiles facing each other also resemble a vase. Our brains go back and forth between each visual. With the continuity principle, we perceive lines as part of a continuous movement, unless there's an abrupt change or object blocking the continuation. Once our eyes begin to follow a line or curve, we believe that line will continue in the same direction indefinitely. This creates a line of sight or line of movement. In design, this principle helps the viewer follow an indicated or subconscious visual flow. This example shows two sets of wavy lines, one with gaps and breaks and the other continuous. The left one is a bit confusing at first. Are they shapes? Are they broken lines? The right one, on the other hand, we instantly perceive as two wavy intertwined lines that could potentially continue in either direction indefinitely. The order and symmetry principle states that people tend to perceive objects as symmetrical shapes whenever possible. It's human nature to look for order among chaos. For example, in this graphic with 6 oval eye shapes, we don't see 6 shapes. We see 3 pairs of eyes due to how the interior circles resemble pupils looking towards the center. In a previous lesson, we talked about symmetrical and asymmetrical balance. This principle is the foundation of that design technique. Order and balance are directly related to each other. Look at the example of these symmetrical and non-symmetrical mountain icons. The one on the right more orderly and complete in a way, while the one on the left has a good asymmetrical balance. The last Gestalt principle, synchrony, dictates that elements moving in the same direction are perceived as more related than the same elements moving in a different direction. Elements don't have to be physically moving for the principle to apply. They only need to imply movement. So you can achieve this technique with arrows, triangles, and pointy shapes. Essentially, the pointy bit denotes the direction the shape is going in. This example shows 2 groups of triangles angled to point in different directions. We can perceive that the 4 triangles pointing to the right are part of the same group. On the graphic to the right, the principle is applied fully, grouping 3 triangles together in 2 instances. Using Gestalt principles in design isn't exactly a law you need to follow. It's more like a suggestion to help your designs be more effective. If you want to learn more about Gestalt principles, we've left a link for you in the course materials from an article in our blog. Just like visual balance and composition, Gestalt principles are a technique that improves with time. When you look at designs around you in your daily life, try and find how Gestalt principles play a part. In all the upcoming lessons using the promotional booklet example, I'll make a point of explaining where Gestalt principles show up. In the next lesson, we'll talk about a design technique called alignment. I'll show you how to use tools inside Visme to achieve optimal alignment for your designs. If you still haven't created a Visme account to follow along with the course, now is the perfect time to do so. Alright, great job everyone, and I will see you in the next one. Hello and welcome back to Design Foundations. In the last lesson, we talked about the design principle of hierarchy and visual perception. Those are the soft rules to achieve visual balance and composition in your designs. In this lesson, we'll look at another principle that's vital for every design you undertake. It's called alignment. Alignment is a design principle that involves positioning elements in a way that establishes a sense of order, consistency, and visual harmony. It's critical for visual balance and good composition for every design project you undertake. Without conscious alignment, elements can look scattered and chaotic, but when you apply alignment design principle, the relationship between elements is clear and the composition looks and feels right. Alignment itself exists in several capacities. Regarding text, they are left and right alignment, centered alignment, and the last, justified alignment. To understand how alignment works and why, we have to talk about grids. Think of a grid like a structure or framework to which text and design elements can align to. Grids are made up of columns and rows in balanced proportions that help align things in a balanced way. The magic of grids is that they help you with alignment, balance, layout, composition, and the whole big picture. Grids are technically invisible, but you can make them visible while designing. This is a 1-column document grid with margins, essential for a letter design. This is a simple 3-column grid with even spacing between columns that works for magazine pages, proposal pages, visual documents, flyers, and a whole lot more. Grids also help build websites and mobile apps, even billboards. So what do grids do? They help build the invisible layout where the alignment lines will be and what the elements will align to. Two of these lines are margins and guides. Margins are the invisible spaces along the edges of a canvas that give a design breathing room. Guides are lines that you can place on a design to settle what a group of objects and text will align to. Now let's put alignment, grids, margins, and guides into practice. So let's use this page of our booklet as an example. It's a letter from the founder of the company. Everything on the left half of this page is left aligned. The margin line is invisible but still quite evident on the left side of the page. This margin line is the guide to align the text and image to the left side of the page. Here's a tip that you can use with Visme to get your margins at just the right spot. Activate the grid in the View tab and set it to 60 by 60 or 70 by 70. Also, turn on the rulers to show on the editor. These are useful grid sizes for most design canvases. Choose one of the vertical lines at around 1 inch to be your margin. The opposite of left alignment is right alignment. This is when the invisible line is on the right instead of the left. So let's see what that would look like in this text. First, I'll select the text and then click the right alignment icon to change the text alignment. I'll now take it back to the left align and I'll go to page 5 to show you another alignment style, centered alignment. This page has two sections. The top has a large image centered vertically on the page. The bottom section has a center aligned group of text boxes and a small separator. This alignment type is also an option in the dropdown. The fourth option for aligning text is called justified alignment. Let's see what happens if we justify align these two text boxes. I select them and then click Edit to open the options and select this icon with the lines aligned on both the right and left margins. Justified alignment is a bit tougher to get right than the other three. It looks nice and neat when the text boxes are a good size, but it can happen that the words become too separated and a lot of space makes the text look bad. Thankfully, you can just resize the text box until it just looks just right. If you're following a column grid, want justified alignment, and need to keep the width at a certain size, you can either add or remove text or change the font size. Printed newspapers are the perfect example for how to use justified alignment and grids effectively. Text isn't the only thing you can apply alignment rules to. Any object, element, or illustration can be aligned. I'll show you how they work on this page of our booklet. First, select all the objects, text boxes, icons, images, whatever is there, then click on the alignment tool and select the position you want to align to. In this case, left aligned. Inside the tool, you can also choose to align to top or to bottom. In this case, it wouldn't help, but in other situations it will, so try testing it after the lesson. Apart from the alignment tool, you also have guides, helpful lines that work as aligned anchors for a group of objects. On this page, the two images at the top meet at the center of the page. Then we use a vertical guide, placed it at the center, and align this element here. Now let's go back to the page with the letter and show you how a guide can help align different object types. Before, we looked at how to align the text inside a text box. Now we'll see how you can align text, images, or any element along the same margin or guide. In Visme, you have two options for aligning objects to align. You can either place the guide and align everything to it, like we're doing here, or you can go into the view settings and turn on Smart Guides to let the editor help you align things. If you turn on Snap to Object, the editor gives you even more ways to align things easily. There's even a Snap to Grid option if you'd like to use that. So before continuing on to the next lesson, why not take a little time to practice alignment within the Visme editor? Test the alignment tools with the promotional booklet template or any other template in the gallery. If you'd like to learn more in depth about grids, alignment, and design principles, check out the links in the supplemental material for this lesson. In the next installment, we'll begin a new section about colors, shapes, and typography. First, we'll start with color theory and how it can help you create amazing designs that speak to the viewer's emotions. So I will see you in that one. Hello and welcome back to Design Foundations. Now that you've learned about the vital design principles of creating balanced designs, it's time to look at other characteristics of a design. In this lesson, we'll be looking at color and how it affects your composition in a variety of ways. I mentioned in the previous lesson that color plays a part in your design's hierarchy. Well, it also influences the results of your visual message through psychology and perception. First, we'll cover the basics of color theory. Color theory is the technical language for explaining how color works. It's the art and science of mixing and matching colors to look visually appealing and convey messages. A basic tool for understanding color theory is the color wheel, which has long been an educational hands-on tool for learning and discovering colors. The artistic color wheel, which starts with the primary colors red, blue, and yellow, is meant for use with pigments, paints, inks, and natural dyes. When two of these colors mix, you get these secondary colors, green, purple, and orange. This is the color wheel everyone uses to learn about color in schools. Artists and illustrators also learn color theory with the color wheel early on in their studies. But digital and graphic designers learn two additional color modes in order to work on screens and send content to print. These color modes are called CMYK and RGB. The color mode for printed material is CMYK, and the color mode for digital material is RGB. The RGB color mode is made of three primary colors, red, green, and blue. These are colors made of light, and when they overlap, they create these secondary colors, yellow, cyan, and magenta. The CMYK mode is also made up of three primary colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow. The K stands for black because you need black ink to make pure black or to darken other tones. The secondary colors in this color mode are red/orange, green, and blue or violet. When you're designing for screens, you always use the RGB color mode, but if you're designing for print, the printers will switch the color mode to CMYK to match your design to the ink pigments in their machines. When using professional design tools, you can switch color modes yourself. Using the RGB color mode, every color has a hex number code. These numbers are made up of 6 digits, and each 2-digit represents values of red, green, and blue. The values range from 1 to 9. 0 stands for no color, and F stands for full color. Hex numbers are super practical because they help you find and use interesting colors in your designs. You'll notice inside the Visme editor that when you check or change the colors in the color picker, the hex numbers show up to help you keep track of colors. To learn more about color theory, color modes, and hex numbers, refer to our comprehensive color guide. The link is in the lesson resources. Okay, enough about the technical stuff. So now let's get into color psychology and perception of mood. Color psychology refers to how color affects moods and conveys meaning. This applies to every aspect of design, including digital design. An interesting thing about color psychology is that a lot of it has to do with our perceptions of color and how it can be used to create mood. All colors have nuances and characteristics like temperature, tonality, brightness, depth, and saturation. These all work together to create an endless combination of colors. Let's talk about the color yellow. What is the first thing you think of when you think of the color yellow? I bet the first thing you think of was the sun, or maybe even a lemon. This bright version of the color yellow transmits happiness, creativity, and light. But what happens when yellow has another nuance, like a dull or sickly yellow? Then the color yellow is no longer happy and bright. Perceptions like this happen with colors. Green, for example, is generally perceived as natural, fresh color. Many brands that boast a natural aspect use bright, lively green in their logos. Military green, on the other hand, has a different perception, one of camouflage or control. Another color with differing perceptions is brown. Aside from being related to eco-friendly brands, it's also considered a dirty color that doesn't translate to beauty or cleanliness. You can find out more about this in our color psychology guide and article about color perceptions. Before we move on to some Visme tips for using color, let's discuss color palettes. A color palette is a combination of colors used in a design. They're the colors used in the titles, the text, any design elements, and even the images. Following a color palette in your designs, it makes it easier to construct a balanced composition and layout. All our Visme templates, for example, have been designed with pre-selected color palettes. Color palettes for design typically have between 3 and 5 colors and are formulated as color harmonies, which means that the combination of colors is harmonious and balanced. Colors on their own can set a mood, but a color palette can create an entire atmosphere. Let's look at the color palette of our home decor promotional booklet. The colors are a strong and classy terracotta, a calm cream, a very dark green for text, and touches of ochre and dark gray or black. So look at how each color has a hex number under it. You could copy all the colors and apply the palette to another design. Now let's look how Visme helps you use color in several ways. First of all, this is the color settings dialog. This is where you can change the color of an object, browse color palettes, and extract colors from an image. If you'd like to change all the colors on the design simultaneously, you can use the pre-designed color themes. You can easily create a color theme from your brand colors in your Visme brand kit. More on that later. In this lesson, we looked at how color plays an important part in a design. That said, we've only really touched the surface. We recommend that you read the articles we've linked in the resources for this lesson, so you'll gain lots more knowledge about how color works, how to use it, and how it can affect your design goal. Now that you know a bit more about color than you did at the beginning of this lesson, be aware of the colors and designs around you. Look at social media posts, billboards, or packaging and analyze how they used color to get their message across. In the next installment, we'll be talking about fonts and typography. You'll learn how to use type as part of the design and not an afterthought. So, I'll see you soon. Hello and welcome back to Design Foundations. In the last lesson, we talked about color and how it can be used to transmit a message through emotion and perception. In this lesson, we'll talk about typography and fonts and cover the basics, so you have a better foundation to use in your designs. Typography is everywhere. It's on packaging, apps, books, websites, street signs, labels, and in presentations. In technical terms, typography means the style or appearance of text. It also means the practice of working with text. When you're new at designing, typography can seem daunting, but a little knowledge can go a long way in improving your designs. First, let's define the difference between the words font, typeface, and font family. They are terms that are often used interchangeably but are actually pretty different things. When we talk about typefaces, we're referring to the types of typography styles that exist. For example, there are serif typefaces, script typefaces, and display typefaces. When we're talking about a font family, we're referring to a specific style designed as a family of fonts that are span across different weights and sizes. A font is one of the styles that make up a font family. For example, Montserrat, the Visme brand font, is a font family. This means that Montserrat Bold is one font, while Montserrat Light is another font, and together make up the Montserrat typeface. Some fonts don't have font families and are standalone. This is the case mostly with display typefaces, but more on that later. Now let's explore how typefaces are defined according to their characteristics. There are two main styles, serif and sans serif. Serif, the most classic style, has small strokes called serifs on each letter. They exude a classic charm and are often chosen for more traditional projects. You'll also find them in printed newspapers and books. Serif fonts make longer text easy to read because the strokes impart a feeling of continuity from letter to letter. Typefaces without serifs are called sans serif, coming from the French word sans, which means without. Sans serif typeface is considered more modern in relation to the serifs. You've probably seen serif fonts mostly on websites where they display better than serif fonts. Serif and sans serif aren't the only types of typefaces. You've also got display fonts, which come in various styles, like script, black letter, all caps, and a whole lot more. These decorative typefaces work better for small portions of text, headers, or designs with a graphic flair. Some display fonts have actually gathered a bad reputation when used in designs. Many designers suggest staying away from them. These are going to be Comic Sans, Papyrus, and Curls. Take your time to find the best fonts for your designs. Similar to how color emits emotion and perception, so do fonts. They have unique personalities and convey more than words. They can be casual, exotic, or graphic. It's crucial to choose a font that aligns with your message. The letters and fonts are made up of many other bits and pieces, but typography has a sort of anatomy or architecture to it. Every font or font family is constructed and designed according to a basic format and terminology. So look at the word typography and how it sits along a line with the G, P, and Y hanging over the edge. This is called the baseline, and it is the line that defines where the letters lay in terms of design, alignment, spacing, and whatever else. The two heights are X height and cap height. The X height measures the ascenders of the letters that have them, like the H here. The cap height measures the height of the capital letters. X height and cap height are different for each type family. All the other terms you see here are a little more technical, so if you'd like to learn them and much more about font architecture and terminology, make sure to read our guide linked in the course materials. A few other pieces of font terminology that you should know are kerning, leading and tracking, and hierarchy. To give you a visual of these typography topics, we'll use a presentation template for HR consultants as an example. As we've already discussed, hierarchy is a crucial tool to guide the reader's eye to the most important elements. You can do the same with typography. Capitalized letters have a higher hierarchy than lowercase letters. Strong, powerful fonts have more hierarchy than other thin, light fonts. Leading is the word for line spacing in typography. It ensures your text is comfortably readable. Default spacing is typically good enough. Avoid extremes, as too much or too little leading can disrupt the reading experience. Tracking, or character spacing, allows you to adjust the overall space between characters. Experiment with this to achieve artistic effects or fix poorly spaced fonts. And kerning is the specific space between two characters. It varies across words due to differing letter combinations, so be mindful of fonts with bad kerning, and consider alternatives if your chosen font has the issue. When using fonts in design, there are some basic rules to follow that'll help you create good visual balance as well as a message. The number one rule when designing with type is to have at most 2 fonts in one design. If you want more than one for creating contrast, play with size, weight, or style variations of the same font family to create interesting combinations. The saying opposites attract is also true for fonts. Don't hesitate to pair different but complementary font styles like sans serif with serif, short with tall, or decorative with simple. Pairing fonts is a crucial part of using typography. A bad pairing can impair any design. A good pairing will feel comfortable to read while aligning with the rest of the design and the overall message. When you design with Visme, choosing and pairing fonts is really simple. For individual fonts, browse the long list of fonts and create combinations, or you can use the pre-designed font pairs to use those. We hope you enjoyed this introduction to the basics of typography. Remember to check out all the guides we published about fonts in the course materials. In the next lesson, we'll talk about icons and shapes in design and how they affect your layout and message. So I will see you in that one. Hello and welcome back to Design Foundations. In the previous lesson, we looked at the basics of typography and how you can use it effectively in design. In this lesson, you'll learn about shapes and icons and how to use them to achieve a good balance and composition in your projects. Shapes and icons work together to help you create balanced designs that flow well and also assist in minimizing text and telling stories with visuals. Just like colors and fonts, shapes also play an important part in your design's hierarchy. They help bring attention to certain areas of your design that otherwise can get missed. They can also help unify slides across a presentation like this one here that uses the same shape combination on every page with slight variations of placement and size. Shapes exist in 3 formats: geometric, organic, and abstract. Geometric shapes are the ones you typically think of when talking about shapes: squares, circles, triangles, rectangles, and so on. Organic shapes represent things we know about nature and life around us. The most common organic shapes are plant-based, like flowers, leaves, mountains, and clouds. Organic shapes can also look like paint splatters and watercolor blobs. Typically, organic shapes are asymmetric and irregular. Finally, we have abstract shapes, which are depictions of real things without being exact visual representations. A stick figure, for example, is an abstract shape. Symbols are also considered to be abstract shapes. Let's talk about geometric shapes, beginning with the circle. As a shape, the circle signifies continuity, wholeness, and a natural sense of completion. It is the most used shape in logos as a border or background. Likewise, many icons are abstract shapes inside of circles, and the majority of social profile bio images are also circles. So why are circles used so often in design? Well, that's because they have an overall positive feeling and make things look good. In a psychological sense, circles are agreeable and welcoming. But a circle isn't just a circle, it's also the sun, a ball, an orange, a ring, a button, and a smiley face. How about triangles? Well, this 3-pointed shape is extremely versatile. When pointing up, a triangle represents stability and power, which doesn't happen when it's pointing down. Triangles pointing right or left represent movement and speed in the direction in which it's pointing. When it comes to organic shapes, they're endless. Since they're shapes that mirror and represent nature, there's no limit to them. Organic shapes are more direct in terms of meaning. They mean what they depict. They are very different to geometric shapes, which are typically more conceptual. Abstract shapes are pretty much any object turned into a shape, which brings us to icons. Icons are visual representations of objects, processes, concepts, or ideas, and they are great at helping you cut down on text and making the content flow on a design. Icons can also be used in any type of design, from infographics to presentations and anything in between. Icons are available in a variety of styles and color combinations, so when using icons in design, you need to be cohesive. Choosing the right icon style and unifying them with color makes your design look well balanced and coherent. The biggest mistake people make when designing with icons is that they use many different styles that really don't match each other. This only creates visual confusion and a lack of flow. The best way to stay cohesive is to use a set of icons that have the same style or the same color theme. So let's take a look at this page in our example presentation. The icons are all the same style and the color circles holding them are the same as in the rest of the presentation. This is a great example of how icons and shapes work together for a purpose. In this case, to create a bullet list that is more than just a list. The icons help the viewer skim the list, making it easier to understand quickly. Some icons are super simple, while others are very detailed. Choose the type that best matches your content and style. If you're creating an interactive design, you can use animated icons to bring your content to life. Icons are super practical. That's why Visme has so many of them in the editor. To find them, just click on the graphics in the left side tab or use the / keyboard shortcut. Changing icons in design is easy. Simply click replace when right-clicking an icon in the canvas and find another one. Using shapes in Visme is also easy. Select the shapes from the menu and resize or change its color using the tools in the canvas. Visme also has shaped frames to use with photos like circles and diamonds. Once placed in the frame, you can move the photo until you get the perfect fit. If you'd like to learn lots more about using shapes and icons in design, don't hesitate to browse the course material for a list of articles that delve even deeper into the subject. Hopefully this lesson has piqued your curiosity. So in the next lesson, we'll look at how to use visuals like photos, illustrations, textures, and more to help you tell stories and transmit messages with design. So I will see you in that one. Hello and welcome back to Design Foundations. In the previous lesson, you learned about fonts, colors, shapes, and icons as design elements in a composition. In this lesson, we'll dig deeper into visual communication and how you can use visuals purposely in your design. So let's dive right in. Visual communication is the practice of telling stories and conveying messages through the help of visuals. On this occasion, we'll concentrate specifically on photos, illustrations, and textures, some of the most common types of visuals available to you. We'll talk about their characteristics and then go over some actionable tips for using them effectively. First, let's talk about photography. In design, photos hold many functions, from journalistic captures and newspaper layouts to eye-catching beauty campaigns and everything in between. Images can accompany text or replace it completely. You can use photos as backgrounds, as part of a story, or as supporting material. It all depends on what message you wish to convey. The first thing to remember when using photos is that there's no rule saying that you have to use the image in its original form. You can crop it, frame it, remove objects from it, or even make cutouts by erasing the background. You can also apply filters and color overlays to create unique visuals that fit your goals. Look at how the slides in this presentation use photography to accompany the text and break up the space so that everything flows well. Notice how the accent color is purple and how some images have purple in them. This creates visual unison between the graphic elements and the photography. On this slide, there are two images in a checkerboard pattern with text. In this case, the images accompany the text conceptually, but you can also input brand images that tell a deeper story. The best way to know is to try a few different photos until you've got the right one. In this next slide, the photograph has a purple color overlay, continuing with the purple theme. When using photos as backgrounds, adding an overlay gives the design depth while also making the text easy to read. Aside from photography, you can also incorporate illustrations into your designs. Illustrations are visuals that depict scenes, people, or objects in an illustrative style, like a drawing or a sketch. Illustrations are available in many different styles, and the trick to achieve a balanced design with them is to use one style and stick to it throughout the design. Look at this infographic. For example, all the visuals are illustrations. They help tell the story of how to create an infographic so well that the text is minimal. Now look at this sales playbook. All the pages have 3D illustrations to accompany the text. In this case, the illustrations aren't telling the story on their own. They're decorative material for what's being explained on the pages. The third visual type is textures. A texture is a type of visual that doesn't depict anything in particular and can be a photograph or an illustration. Here are some textures to give you an idea. These are photographic textures, and these are illustrative textures. Textures work great as backgrounds, but can also be cropped into shapes to create depth in a composition. In this presentation we looked at before, the illustrative texture is used as a circle mixed in with other solid shapes. Then in this presentation template, the photographic texture is used as a semi-background for text. In this case, the texture is a photograph paired with a black shape to create section separator for that presentation. When combining visuals with text, it's good to remember the design principles we talked about at the beginning of the course. You don't want the visuals to feel messy or unrelated to the text. So use the alignment tool to align the visuals and keep things balanced. Likewise, if you're going for an asymmetrical look, play around with the positioning until it feels balanced. When you use photos or textures as backgrounds, they can expand the entire width or height of the canvas, or even both. Leave spaces between photos and text to make the content flow and not feel so crowded. Working with visuals in Visme is very easy. You can access millions of photos, illustrations, and textures right inside the editor. All you have to do is search for them. The easiest way is with shortcuts. Here's how it works. Click on the / and a dialog opens where you can search for any type of visual you need. This shortcut helps you find various design elements inside the editor. To edit a photo you've added to your presentation, click on the Edit button at the top and add an overlay or filter. To place the photo in frame, click on the Frames button and choose the shape you like best. Now it's your turn to try and incorporate visuals into your design. Take a little time to browse some templates and see how visuals are used, then try to make some compositions of your own. You'll have a handle on this technique in no time. In the next lesson, we'll talk about using data visualization in your designs to tell stories. So, I will see you in the next one. Hello and welcome back to Design Foundations. In the previous lesson, you learned about visual communication and how to use photos, illustrations, and textures to convey messages in a balanced way. So in this lesson, we will continue with visual communication and look at how to use data visualization in design to tell data stories and convey information visually through charts, graphs, and infographic compositions. So first of all, what exactly is data visualization? Data visualization is the practice of representing data in a visual format. It transforms raw data into meaningful visuals, making complex information more accessible and understandable. Whether you're presenting sales figures, marketing trends, or survey results, data visualization helps you communicate your message pretty effectively. So here are some examples of data visualization. I'm going to bring this a little closer because we're going to be pretty hands-on today. So this analytics report, the bar graph, takes up a whole page and also matches in color and style with the rest of the pages. Today you'll learn how to achieve that with Visme. So now look at this infographic with a collection of data visualizations that tell a data story about human resource statistics. As you can see, all the charts, graphs, and infographic icons have the same color theme and style. They're separated into sections to provide hierarchy and flow to the design. And finally, we have this example. It's an interactive visualization that shares information about different dog breeds. You can click on each breed circle at the top and the content changes accordingly. And yes, you can create this type of visualization with Visme as well. So let's go back to the financial report and recreate the bar graph that we saw earlier. So to add a graph or chart to a Visme project, click on the Data tab, then open the Charts and Graphs menu and search for the bar graph. Or you can click on the / keyboard shortcut and scroll to Charts and Graphs. So to add data to your bar chart, input it manually here or import or connect from a live Google Sheet or Excel online document. So once the data is in, we can start to customize. Let's resize the chart itself and place it inside the shape. And now we have to go into settings to customize everything else. First, let's add the colors. Copy the color hex code from one of your document colors and add it to the color cell in the chart settings. So next, let's make the chart look how we want it to look. We'll remove the grid in the Appearances tab, and then in the Legend tab, we'll position ourselves to the top and align it to the right. And we'll change the font to one used in our project and we'll resize it. In the Values tab, we'll toggle to show values and change the font as well as we adjust the size and switch the value position to the top. Now the chart is in balance with the rest of the design, creating a data story that complements the rest of the content. Now let's look at the infographic and talk about data widgets and other infographic style data visualizations that you can use in your designs. These first two charts are a half pie and a pie graph. Notice how they use the same colors and fonts. The legend has been designed separately to make it bigger. This bar graph at the bottom has been customized to look as minimal as possible, and this legend is also a separate design. Above the bar graph is a section with icons and legends depicting recruitment steps and time frames. The thing about data visualization is that it's not always just charts and graphs. You can use other types of visuals to create data stories. Now let's look at one more infographic that uses data widgets for the visualization. Here at the top are two percentage gauges aligned to each other inside a long rectangle that frames all the data visualizations. Percentage gauges can also be customized in terms of color and fonts, just like the charts and graphs, so it's easy to make them match half donuts and half pie charts. So notice how the 3D illustrations also use the same color palette. Great visual balance going on here. When creating and putting together data visualizations, either on their own or as part of a larger design, remember the design principles we've talked about. The visualization must be in balance with all the other content and should flow seamlessly with it, just like in the examples we looked at in this lesson. By the way, they are all Visme templates, so you might want to check those out. If you want to learn more about data visualization in design, you can read our blog. You'll find links to some articles of interest in the lesson materials down below. Hello and welcome back to Design Foundations. In the previous lessons, you learned the elemental foundations of design. Now, we'll dive into more conceptual principles to help you create comprehensive design material for your business or project. Previously, we discussed balance and how to achieve it. Now, we'll talk about cohesiveness and consistency and why they're important. Cohesiveness is mainly concerned with how design elements complement each other in a single design project. When a design is cohesive, it has a feeling of wholeness and, yes, balance. Elements like fonts, textures, and images across the pages are similarly or related visually. Consistency is when those elements form part of other related projects, for example, in the same campaign. With cohesiveness and consistency, you can create a set of visual assets for a marketing campaign or something similar, in which design elements carry over from one design to another. Cohesiveness and consistency are key elements of a brand identity. They are the foundation of a brand guidelines document that must be applied to all projects for that brand. Similarly, the concept applies to any set of interrelated designs that form part of a group. So let's look at how you can use these principles in your design projects. First, let's look at how to achieve cohesiveness in a design. This is a multi-page training manual for a data entry operator. Let's analyze what makes this design cohesive. First, the things we've already talked about, the colors and the fonts. As you can see, there's a flow with elements like a red line and center tiles with the same font and size, plus the logo on the top left corner. But when you look a little deeper, you can see that there's a set of design elements that repeat in similar ways across the pages. The logo for the brand is a chevron line design, which is recreated as edge designs on some of the images in the pages. The cover itself has the logo and an extra line, creating movement that inspires a page flip to the next slide. Then there's a trend where images have half the background removed and another thin vertical image style. These are all elements that help with the design's cohesiveness. There's no doubt that these pages belong together and form part of the same design project. If you look closely, you can also see that the images are all in the same lighting or feeling. You can achieve this with filters or by using AI to create a set of images in the same color palette. Now let's move on to consistency. Remember that this concept applies to a group of designs in the same family or from the same project. To achieve consistency across a set of designs, designers create a visual strategy. A visual strategy is a set of rules that makes all designs look like they belong together. Take a look at this set of branded templates. Each one has a different function, but they all share the same visual strategy. To show you how a consistent visual strategy works, we've made this collage look a bit like a mood board. It has the fonts and the colors that are used all throughout the designs. The visual strategy applies to these 5 templates, but could also apply to many more just by following the guidelines. A standout feature amongst all these designs is the dark and light teal colors that show up as backgrounds and color filters on images, fonts, and shapes. You can be sure that these colors are used consistently across all projects that form part of this strategy. Visme has a great feature to help you stay cohesive and consistent with your designs. It's called the Brand Kit, and you can set up your brand in just a few minutes. If you already have a brand and a website, then you can use the Brand Wizard to set up the Brand Kit in a few minutes. Then the AI will create a set of branded templates using those brand guidelines. You can even use the Brand Wizard manually and insert the fonts and colors you'd like to use and create color palettes before the wizard generates a set of templates. Keep in mind that if your site is protected against web crawling or scraping, then the Brand Wizard unfortunately won't work. I hope you now have a good grasp on cohesiveness and consistency and you'll apply it to all your designs. Just remember that the idea is that for a design to be cohesive, all elements must feel like they belong together. And for a set design to be consistent, you need a visual strategy to guide you as you're creating numerous designs. In the next lesson, we'll talk about the concept of less is more and the minimalism design principle. Until next time, I will see you there. Welcome back to Design Foundations, where we go beyond the basics and delve into more specific design topics. In this installment, we'll be talking about the concept of less is more. Less is more is a minimalistic design principle that helps create an aesthetic that's not only beautiful but also practical. The idea is that you only include the essential elements your design needs to tell a story efficiently. We know this principle is important because it's easy to go overboard in a design and include more things than are necessary or not leave enough space for the content to breathe. To fully understand the minimalist design principle, let's look at 6 important factors to consider in minimalistic design. Those are going to be embracing white space, making the design understandable, prioritizing simplicity, considering the power of color, making it adaptable, and focusing on typography. White space is the area of a design with nothing in it, but it's not necessarily white in color. That's why it's also called empty space. In basic terms, the most common empty spaces are the margins and spacing in a design. Further on from that is the area between elements or there's nothing. The purpose of this white space is to bring attention to what really matters and to let the elements breathe. When elements are too close together, a design can feel cluttered and busy. When a design looks cluttered, it can be difficult to understand. You don't really want to confuse people with your design, and minimalism helps you make your design understandable at first glance. For example, when using brand elements in a design, just use enough to ensure that the brand is evident, but don't overload the canvas with decorative elements. Here's a visual comparison of a cluttered design and then one with good use of white space. Notice how much nicer the second one is to look at. Prioritize simplicity by ensuring that your design elements are absolutely necessary and functional to what the content is conveying. Look for ways to bring attention to specific areas of the design without adding more elements. Try bolding the text instead of underlining it or adding a color behind certain words. Think of the flow and the hierarchy so that the viewer doesn't have to guess how to look at the design. Here's another visual comparison of a design that doesn't prioritize simplicity and then one that does. Which one do you think will function better? Color is another super powerful element in design, and it's also a great ally when designing minimally. For example, too many colors can make a design challenging to look at or understand easily. The ideal color palette for a less is more design has one strong color, one medium color, and two neutral tones to balance things out. If you have two or more strong colors, it'll be tough to keep a minimalistic feel. In this visual comparison, you can see how the use of color affects how your design aesthetic looks and feels for the viewer. Which one do you prefer? Another thing to consider is adaptability. You'll likely use one design on a number of platforms, or you'll need to use one base design to create others later on. Adaptability can be difficult to achieve when a design is too complex or full of elements, so make your design simple and flexible from the start and you'll see how much easier they are to repurpose. Finally, the last thing to consider when designing with less is more in mind is typography. The way you use fonts in your designs can greatly affect its functionality and its aesthetic. If your main font is super unique and highly visual, remember to use it sparingly and to pair it with a simple font for the rest of the text. Likewise, if you're using a classic font, don't pair it with another font that's too similar. Just use the same one in bold or in a different weight. Remember the rule of thumb for typography: never use more than 2 or 3 fonts in the same project. Don't use more than 3 variants, even if using just one font type. In this comparison, you can see what I mean by how typography affects the way your design works for the viewer. Which one is more pleasing to your eye? Did you take notes? If you didn't, go back and rewatch to take those notes so you can have them close by every time you're designing something. These are essential tips to help you create well-balanced designs that are both simple and beautiful. In the next and final lesson, we'll look deeper at typography and how it can be used as a design element, not just for text. I bet your designs are already looking much better than they did before the course, so keep practicing and keep learning. All your content will look amazing. Get ready for the next lesson, the last one, and I will see you there. Welcome back to the last lesson in Design Foundations. We hope you've learned a ton of new things and you feel way more confident to design content now. In this final installment, we'll discuss using typography as a design element. It's important to remember that typography is more than just words on a page. It can be a powerful design element that shapes the visual experience. Whether the font you choose is bold and impactful or subtle and elegant, it adds depth and character to your visual storytelling. We'll touch on 2 topics: typography as form and typography as a visual voice. Both are unique ways of looking at type that go beyond titles, subtitles, and body text. Typography as a form relates to the art of turning words and letters into objects and shapes in a design. So instead of adding a title in the regular style like this, you can create something like this. Now, not only is the text functional, but it's also interesting and visually impactful. Let's look at more examples. This poster's title is Cook Like a Pro, but instead of having the title at the top and the quotes in a list below it, the title covers the full page and the quotes are handwritten above it. This magazine article cover not only uses large text for the title, it's also transparent. You can see the background photo through the letters, creating a visual illusion of the letters being cut out from the white area. This sales graphic uses the word sale in a large script font over the image of the model, and the accompanying text also has a presence, as you can see. This example shows you that you don't need to do much to use typography as form. Sometimes it only takes a little to make an impact with type. Here's another example of how you can turn a title into something more interesting. The text is laid sideways and each bit has its own color background. These 2 shapes on the top left diagonally mirror the edge of the boat on the bottom right. Finally, this poster design uses text in the background in a way that creates texture. You can't read what the text says, but it gives the design more depth than it would otherwise with a simple white background. Before we move on to the next section, let's take a moment to talk about expressive typography. This is a technique in which the form of the letters visually represents what the words mean. It's a practice used widely for creating logos, for example. Here are some examples. This is the word London twice that looked like a double-decker bus. Here's the word Van Gogh with the ear cut off. This is the word disco created with pieces of records. As you can see, letters and words can be much more than what they say. They can be shapes, they can tell stories, and they can even be expressive. Look for ways to use fonts creatively in your designs and create unique compositions. The next topic is how typography can have a voice depending on the way it looks. Expressive typography also has this quality, but in this case, the font itself is the one that carries that personality, not a custom shape. You might have seen a graphic like this on social, so it's highly efficient in visualizing how a font can send a message just by how it looks. On the left, the sentence, "I'll be waiting for you," feels sinister and spooky, while on the right, it feels cute and happy. The reasoning behind is that every font type has a personality and voice. For example, serif fonts are elegant and serious, while sans serif fonts are casual and laid back. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The font you choose for your text carries its own story and message, so you need to choose accordingly. This phenomenon is also called font psychology, the science behind how every font has personality. When using typography as a design element, this principle holds even more weight. In this practice, you're choosing to make the font bigger, bolder, and more important so the message the font carries is enhanced. Let's look at more examples of how fonts carry personality and how it can help or hinder your storytelling. This is the cover for one of the Goosebumps books. The title is written in a custom font that resembles a creepy slime. It's a great example because just by reading the series title, you can tell what the books are about: horror stories for kids. Now look at this word. Doesn't the font look familiar? It's playful, handwritten, and it just reminds you of something. It's the Disney font. It's so well known that it's easily recognizable. If you wrote Disney in a different font, would it really have the same nostalgia effect? Probably not. This is another comparison of how a font can help the story or how it just doesn't work. As you can see on the left, the presentation cover for a corporate finance topic. The font is clean cut and easy to read, ideal for the message. On the right is the same design with a font that is inappropriate and out of context completely. Finally, here's the Harry Potter typographic logo, another great example of how to tell a story with type. The font itself is a custom design reminiscent of mystery and magic, but the most standout feature is the bottom of the letter P. It's the shape of the lightning bolt and the same that Harry Potter has on his forehead from his first encounter with Voldemort. Hopefully these examples have helped you understand how typography and fonts can be used as a design element beyond the words it contains. Font psychology is important in design. Give it the merit it deserves. Well, we've come to the end of our course. At this stage, you have all the basic tools to feel more at ease with designing. Remember that using templates can save you a lot of time and effort in the long run. They're a great base from which to work on. After some time, you can start designing from scratch, putting into practice all the tools you've learned in this course. Before you can receive the certificate for the course, you'll have to take a quiz to test your knowledge. You'll find these in the supplemental material for this lesson. Have fun with it, and I can't wait to see how well you do. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you around.